Close, we're so glad that you're with us today. And for those of you who would like to put her on the speaker view and put the gallery to the side, you can do that. Coach Close was named the Michael Price Family UCLA Women's Head Basketball Coach on April 21st, 2011, and is currently at 198 wins and 104 losses. 2019 and 20 was a historic year for Coach Close and the Bruins. UCLA won its first 13 games of the campaign, setting a new program record for the most consecutive wins to start a season. The Bruins win over then number 6 Stanford marked Coach Close's 100th career Pac-12 victory. UCLA would ultimately finish the year 26-5 and was set to host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. The national postseason schedule, however, was canceled due to COVID-19, as we know. There is great news, however. The team's 2020-2021 season is going to take place. They held their first practice on September 28th, and the season will begin on the NCAA official start date of November 25th. The 2020-2021 campaign will mark Coach Close's milestone 12th season at the helm of the Bruins. Coach Close is a graduate of UC Santa Barbara. She was a 4-year starting point guard for their women's basketball team and captained the 1992 and 1993 teams, which each advanced to the second round of the NCAA tournament. For those of you fortunate enough to have heard Coach Cori Close speak, because we like to have her over and over, you know how inspiring and motivating she is. We thought everyone could use a little boost of optimism at this point and during this ongoing pandemic and period of social unrest. So we are very grateful to her for sharing her time with us today on using a coaching mentality to remain positive through a pandemic. There is time allotted after the presentation for questions, so please submit them using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. They will be reviewed and consolidated by Melissa, and I will present them to Coach Close. So, Cori, we look forward to hearing you.
Can I interrupt for 1 sec? Sorry, it's Melissa. If you send the questions directly to me, that will make it easier and less confusing in the chat function. Sorry to interrupt.
Good point. Everyone hear that? All right, Cori.
Well, thank you so much for having me with you today. This group, and Taylor's on, he can attest to this, that this is really one of my favorite groups to come and spend time with. You inspire me as a woman that wants to lead women into doing amazing things for the sake of others. You all are the role models. And, you know, I tell you that every time I have the opportunity to be with you, but it's true and it remains true. And so it is more inspiring for me than it is for you. I can guarantee that. And I just really appreciate the work you do, the modeling that you exemplify, and the way you live your lives. So thank you for just taking time to be with me, or let me be with you, I should say. You know, it's interesting. I'm gonna throw it off just for a second, because how do you stay positive during the pandemic? Well, I'm gonna tell you that you don't, honestly. And I'll explain as we go along, but I think what I'm gonna share today, and I think what I've really learned about myself, is that I really just share from my heart, and the fact that these are I'm gonna share 4 things that have kept me going during these times. And when I share these things, I'm preaching to myself first. These are not things that I do right every day. These are not things that I am perfect at and raise the banner like follow me. So when I say these things, I am literally preaching them to myself, reminding myself, so that we might walk more productively and contented during these really difficult times. So please hear my heart in that. But so how do you, I mean, how do you sort of manage, I mean, as strong, amazing women that you are, and whether you're leading your household, whether you're leading in your jobs, whether you're leading in any way, you are leading, and that I am sure of. And, you know, how do we love and lead people well during these incredibly intense times? I was talking to my parents one day, and they were saying, well, how are you doing? And I said, I don't think I've ever had a time in my leadership where I had every single area of my personal life and professional life be so intense. You know, there's been financial strain, obviously, with the different things, both from a fundraising standpoint and leadership, and personally. There's been, you know, I lead a program that are predominantly Black women, and to really want to love and lead them well, there's just been so much intensity surrounding that journey and wanting to do that well. The wonderings of, is there going to be a season or not? You know, do I have, do I have COVID or not? How do I operate safely? But there's just been not one area that didn't have great intensity. So I really honestly started asking the question that you all asked of me is, how do I coach and lead and love well in the midst of these really difficult, intense times? And the first thing that has been really helpful to me is set and reset, refocus versus focus. Set and reset to me is I set my mind every single day. I heard a quote today actually that was really good. The mind is a beautiful servant, but a dangerous master. And if I don't set my mind every single day with great intentionality, I find that it goes from being a servant to a master. And so in order to keep it as a servant, I try to discipline myself every single day to set it according to the ways and the principles in which I want to anchor my life. We do it as a basketball team as well. Every single day, we spend the first 12 minutes of practice setting our minds. First, we do 4 minutes of visualization. They have the opportunity to watch themselves doing it right. And it's not like a rah-rah highlight film. It's like, okay, if I want to shoot better free throws, it's going to show me doing a perfect free throw. Watch ourselves doing what we want to do more of. Or it's in its various skills, or they can write in their journal to how they want the practice to play out. Today, the practice is I'm going to go past every line. I'm going to be a great teammate. I'm going to have excellent eye contact every time I'm corrected. And they write the narrative to themselves of what they want to play out in their practice. And it's a discipline of setting their minds. And then we go on to some other film parts, but we never negotiate that we never compromise that. And here's the deal is that you can't carry it over. So just because we set our mind for practice yesterday, didn't mean that this morning when we started practice, we didn't have to set our mind again. I don't know about you, but we have this phrase in our program that you have to choose discipline over default. And I don't know about you, but like when I wake up in the morning, I never have to remind myself to think about me. You know, I just do that automatically. And, you know, so I wake up and I think about how I'm feeling that day, what I need to do that day. That is a default response. If I want to live a life that is poured out, principled centered for the sake of others, you know, that is well-purposed, and, you know, giving in a way that I would like to live my life by, that's going to take great discipline. Because without setting my mind each day, I will revert to default every time. And so it's been really important to me to every single morning set my mind. You know, for me, I try to start and end the day with no screens for 30 minutes. So that's one of the ways when I wake up, I try to not have any screens, no social media, no phones. And I literally sit out in my backyard and I have 7 minutes of silence where I just sit and pause and think. And then I write down 10 things I'm thankful for. I write it in my diary, I just write it down. And then I write 10 truths I want to anchor my life that day. And those are usually pretty consistent for me. But that is a discipline for me so that I can overcome my defaults. I used to, and here's where I said set and reset, or refocus versus focus. I used to beat myself up all the time. I don't know about all you. And again, I'm preaching to myself here. I'm sharing about my journey, and hopefully there's some little tidbits that maybe could encourage your hearts as well. But it's interesting. I used to I'm like, why can't I just focus through the entire day? Or how come I lose sight of that? I always lose perspective. And, it's interesting. A guy named Tim Kite, he does a lot of our mental training with our team. He was observing me in practice as a coach. And he afterwards said, you need to stop saying focus. And I said, what do you mean? I mean, every coach, every person goes, come on, every teacher, focus, come on, we got to focus here. And I was like, what's wrong with that? And he goes, have you ever sat through an entire meeting, a staff meeting, and focused 100% of the time? I was like, ooh, no, probably not. Do you think it's possible for any of your players to focus for an entire practice 100% of the time? I was like, oh, probably not. He's like, we all lose focus. We all lose focus. The important thing is that we teach ourselves the awareness and the refocus routines and the equipping to learn to refocus on what we set our minds on what we agreed upon earlier in the day. And that has really helped me, because I have these great intentions. I have these great silence and, gratitude and truths in the morning. I think, okay, great. I am so solid for today. And then what happens about 11 o'clock, where the first, disappointment happens, or the first change in my day, or the first pressurized thing? What happens? I lose perspective for a second, and I have stopped going, well, there I go again. Great. I lost focus again. And I've started trying to practice in my own life. What I preach to our players is, okay, we're all going to lose our focus. What's going to be our routine and our equipping to refocus at a faster rate? How do we do that? I think for me, I have really tried to increase my awareness of when I lose that focus, or lose that set that I had set my mind on. But I also have brought truth tellers in my life. Coach Shannon is someone that's really big. She has the unfortunate burden of exposing my blind spots when I can't see them myself. And so she will say, Cori, I think you're not aware of something here. And so I really think if we're gonna refocus quicker, if we're gonna build awareness to live our lives according to what we wanted to set our minds on, we've got to have truth tellers that we've invited to speak truth into our lives, even when we don't really want to hear it. The other thing that we do with our team that I've tried to do in my own life is really develop a refocus routine. When I was a player, I would say this out loud. I knew I was a better basketball player when I was in a good basketball stance and when I talked in the play. So when I would start to lose my present focus, I would just start saying out loud to myself, stance and talk, stance and talk. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, in my life now as an adult, I really want to live my life that I give and grow every day. So when I feel myself sort of going off track, I literally say out loud, let's just refocus on giving and growing. Are you giving and growing right now? And so that has been really big for me during these really unfortunate times, to number one, build a mindset routine every day. And then to, after that, focus on refocusing, resetting, rather than beating myself up every time I lose perspective. Gandhi has a great quote. He said, I will not let you trounce through my mind with your dirty feet. There's a lot of things that happens through our day that threaten to trounce through our minds with their dirty feet that maybe we don't really want to contemplate, but I will say I have fallen victim to. But so I have really just tried to say, okay, just because I have that thought, or just because I'm not in the right place right now, doesn't mean I have to believe that thought. Doesn't mean I have to follow that thought. So it has been really helpful to me to have a mindset routine every single day, and then really contemplate how to refocus rather than beating myself up for losing perspective. Discipline over default. I had said at the beginning of the talk, so that's number one, set and reset, refocus versus focus. And you are welcome to interrupt me at any time. Susan, don't get mad at me for saying that, but I do want it to be as interactive as I can. So if there's something that doesn't make sense or you'd like me to explain, please feel free to do so. I said at the beginning, how do you stay positive during all this uncertainty? And I said, you don't. And let me explain. We read a great book this summer as a team. And of course, I thought we were reading it for performance mental conditioning. And it's called It Takes What It Takes. And it's by probably one of the leading sports mental trainers in the business. And I've actually known him since I was at Florida State, probably about 15 years. And he's really excellent. He's Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Seattle, I want to say the Storm, because I have WNBA, the Seahawks. He's the quarterback, and he's really been out on the internet about all this neutral thinking, and he's known as one of the most mentally tough guys in the NFL. But we started to read this book, and he talks about that really it's impossible to stay positive all the time. And that especially during these really uncertain times, is that really what you do want to be aware of is, number one, a negative thought is 10 times more powerful than a positive thought. And that it becomes 40% more powerful if you say it out loud. So one of the things he talks about in the book is, just because you have a negative thought, try to catch it and be aware. But he says, just don't say the stupid stuff out loud. That's what he says in it. Don't say the stupid stuff out loud. And he also says, don't try to go from negative to positive. Go from negative to neutral. And neutral is just behavioral-based thinking. Instead of, he uses the example actually from Russell Wilson in the NFC Championship game a few years back before the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. They were down 3 touchdowns, and Russell Wilson had, I think, thrown at least 2 interceptions. And he wasn't in the locker room at halftime going, it's okay, guys, come on, no big deal, let's go, come on, because everybody knew in the locker room it was a big deal. Everyone knew they weren't playing very well. So being this rah-rah guy wasn't going to change any behaviors, wasn't going to lead them down the process and the behaviors of what it really takes to be successful, to have that comeback that they wanted. So when he went to neutral, he was, okay, what's the truth about what's happened to us in the first half? The truth is the truth, but it doesn't attach a whole lot of emotion to it. And what's the next right behavior that we need to execute to lead us to where we want to go? And I've found that so true in my life. And we were recounting the book, and Cameron Brown on our team, she's a sophomore this year. And we were talking about what we had learned from this book, and I would highly recommend it for life. And it's a very easy read. It's very entertaining. He had a few more cuss words in there than I was comfortable with, but the players thought it was cooler that way, so I just went with it. But he, Cameron was talking about, well, Coach, I thought I was gonna read this book so I could become mentally stronger, for performance. But it's actually been my therapy book. And I said, well, what do you mean, Cameron? She goes, every time I thought we were going to come back to campus and then something happened and we couldn't, it taught me how to go back to neutral. Every time I was really struggling with, am I going to be ready? What if we have a season and I haven't been able to train that same way? And anxiousness would rise up in me. And I started having this negative loop in my head. I didn't think I had to become this rah-rah person. I learned how to be equipped to get back to neutral and make the next right behavioral step. And I'm like, I learned way more from my players than they learned from me, let me tell you right now. But I think that's been a huge key for me during these very uncertain times, is learning how to get to neutral and just asking myself, what does this situation require of me? What is my next right behavioral step? One of the things that's been really interesting is I asked, let me tell this story first, and I'll go to this video that we watched in practice yesterday. But, I don't know, how many of you have ever done a triathlon? Anyone? Raise your hand. Me neither. I think it's crazy. But, hey, a lot of people do it. So a friend of mine, John Gordon, was talking to somebody who's done the most double Ironman triathlons in the history of the sport. I think doing one is crazy. Doing 2 back-to-back seems just insurmountable to me. But John Gordon asked him, he said, how do you have the strength? You have to want to quit sometimes. Come on now, mile 24 or, 3/4 of a mile into the swim, the 50-mile bike ride, you have to want to quit. And he goes, of course I want to quit. You have to have negative things in your mind. And he said, of course I do. And he says, well, why don't you? And he made a really impactful statement that I've tried to remember in getting back to neutral. He says, I have mastered the craft of talking to myself rather than listening to myself. I've mastered the craft of talking to myself rather than listening to myself. So, right, default mode, what we were talking about earlier, we get these negative loops going on in our head, and we have the choice whether to listen to them or not. And the way that he keeps going and keeps moving on is that he learns to talk and replace those thoughts instead of letting them overtake him. I know I've let some of my negative thoughts overtake me in the last 6 months. I don't know about you, but it helps me a lot when I learn to talk to myself rather than listen to myself. One of the things we've done to grow in the mental side of our game is that we've shown videos of people being examples of neutral thinking to our players. And we've done it almost, it's part of the way we set our minds before every practice. And one of the ones we showed yesterday, they were talking about why commercials are so powerful. Why do we believe them? And why do ad campaigns work? Why do sponsors spend, millions of dollars on these ad campaigns? And then it was talking about if you were really strong mentally, what would be the ad campaign you'd want to give to yourself? What's the commercial that you should be selling to yourself? What is going to be your ad campaign? And actually what I think we're going to do is every player is going to design their own commercial, and we're going to produce them, and they're going to watch them over and over and over again, and teaching themselves how to get back to neutral. It's so fun because, I know it takes such a long time to have something go from our heads to our hearts. And I always tell our staff, it's the drip drip effect, right? First, we're just planting the seeds in our minds over and over again. And then we're watering those seeds. And then hopefully then it starts to drip drip from the head to the heart. And actually when we were at Stanford last year, I remember we had gone ahead, and then they had made a run back, and it was late in the third quarter, and we had just gone down by 3. And I get with our staff during the timeout. And then by the time I go to talk to our team, they were saying all the right things. Hey, y'all, let's get back to neutral right now. What's the next right thing that's ahead of us? What's our next thing we've got to do? We're fine. And all of a sudden, it was no rah-rah. It was just, what does this situation require of us? And what's our next right step? We then went on. I think we scored the next 7 points. And then we went on to win the game at Stanford, which was really a great game for us. But it was a great moment as a teacher, because that was when it started to take root in their hearts, right? When we did all of that teaching and come through that, which was really, really great. That's what I really try to do when I'm overwhelmed as a leader, which is often. And I just try to pause, gain clarity, get to neutral, and ask myself, what is my next right step? I try to ask myself when I'm planning out the week, what's my next right neutral step in basketball? What's my next, our team is really jumped into these areas of social injustice and racial inequalities, and they have formed, and I say they because it has been completely student driven, more than a dream. And dream is an acronym that is really guidance. They have their mission statement. They've done a strategic plan. They've really worked to garner the support of the entire teammate. They've really talked about what's it going to look like this year with my time, my talent, and my treasure to make a difference in these areas. And they've done a great job with that. But what does it look like for me to make a step to lead in that area? Or in mental health, leading Gen Zs is challenging right now. To be honest with you, I have Coach Shannon on our staff sent me an article the other day about mental health for Gen Zs, and that 1 in 4 Gen Zs will seriously contemplate suicide in their time. And so as I think about that, I got to really think hard about the way that I'm entering in a mental health space and leading and loving them well in that. I'm going to have the highest fundraising burden that I've ever had here at UCLA this year. And thanks to Taylor, he's been very helpful to me this week. But what's my next right neutral step in those areas? And when I single it down, it's a lot more palatable. It's a lot more easy to put my mind around. So obviously set and reset. Number 2 is put it in neutral. And then number 3 is lean into the hard. Pressure is a privilege. I don't know about you. I asked this question, and I think I may have shared this with you all before, but I always ask the question in home visits. I always say, tell me about a time you're most proud of your growth. Tell me about the time in your life that you just are like, man, I really feel that was meaningful, and I'm really proud of the growth and what I showed in that moment. And every time I hope that they say, yeah, drinking iced tea by the pool, that's when I showed the most meaning and growth and purpose. But it never is that way, is it? Right? It's always when I had to overcome, when I had to conquer something that was really, really hard. And, and I think that nothing meaningful and purposeful is ever handed to you. And so if I really want something that's meaningful and purposeful, if I want to lead to that end, and boy, 2020 has given me a lot of opportunities on a lot of different fronts to lean into the hard and to embrace the pressure. That really, if you want something of purpose and you want contentment and meaning, I really think you have to see pressure as a privilege. It's your rite of passage to pursue something of that depth and that meaning. I don't know if any of you guys know Tony Bennett. He's the men's basketball coach of University of Virginia. And I guess now it would be 3 years ago, he was the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament going in for the men. And he was the first men's coach as a 1 seed to lose to the overall number 16 seed, the worst team in the entire field. So in essence, I guess there's 68 teams that are let into the men. So in essence, it's the 68th team losing to the overall number 1 team. And it was really devastating. And so, he's just a brilliant teacher, and he's very principled centered guy, and he led his team incredibly well. And fast forward 12 months later, he leads his team again. He's the number 1 seed again, but this time led them all the way through, and they end up winning the national championship. And in his press conference, he talked about something about what do you think the key to this year is? And he said, number 1 thing is how we leaned into adversity. I told my guys that if you are willing to handle when they lost, when they were disappointed, when they were in the depths of despair, he said to them, and he lived with them for the next year, if you are willing to lean into this adversity, if you are willing to channel and handle it well, it can buy you a ticket to a place that you would never have been able to go otherwise. That's what I want to do as a leader. That's what I want to do as a human being, is I want to lead to places that I never maybe could have not gone otherwise. I want the deep stuff. I want the long lasting stuff. I want the meaningful things. I want you all to look at our program and go, man, I'm proud of our Bruin women and the way that they're tackling these hard things. And if I want that, I have to lean into the hard stuff. I have to see pressure as a privilege. I wonder if you were just looking back on your life, who are the people you remember the most? What are the interactions? What are the things you can feel, you can taste, you can touch? I know for me, it's the people who walked with me in my most difficult days. It's the people who entered in with me on the hard stuff, on the hard days. And they weren't afraid to enter in with me on that front. I remember I lived with a family when I was at Santa Barbara for 7 years, and I was really close to their kids, and it was really a big thing. And I had a really unfortunate thing that their 18-year-old son ended up committing suicide. And when I was actually coaching at Florida State at the time, and when I came back and we were walking through this, he said, I don't expect people to know what to say. I don't know what to say. He's like, it's been the most difficult thing in my life. He said, I just need you to show up. I don't care if you want to sit on my porch and not say a word, just show up. And I've never forgotten that. That was 16 years ago. And I've never forgotten that, because the reality is that he just knew. He didn't even know what he needed people to say. He just knew he needed people to enter in with him and show up on the hard days. And I think about, I ruptured my Achilles tendon my freshman year of college. And still to this day, I remember a note that somebody wrote me that said, Cori, when you're a real doer in your life, and my faith is really important to me. And so she was speaking to this part of my heart, but she said, when you're a real doer in your life, sometimes you need to let go and just let God catch you. and you need to let yourself get to the end of your rope and just let God catch you. And to this day, I know, and she walked with me through that injury and entered in with me and mentored me and 49 years old. But I think about that and how impactful those kinds of people who enter in on the hard days, who lean into the pressure, who see those things as opportunities. And guess what? I get to now pay that forward with the young women. I get a chance to be a part of their lives. I get a chance to walk with these women in some of the most difficult days of their lives that they've experienced up to this point. Is it fun? Like the normal fun? No. Is it meaningful? Absolutely. Is it where the deep stuff really happens when I get real fulfillment? Yes, it is. And so instead of seeing this adversity of 2020, and believe me, I lose sight of this all the time, and I have to apply the refocus routines that I preach about to myself. But what an opportunity. I might get a chance to be one of those people that they talk about in 20 years that entered in with them on the hard days. I might get a chance to walk through with our staff and really raw conversations about how difficult some of these things have been. And I just don't think you get that without leaning into the hard. You know, I try to lead, I call it the healthy tension. You know, there's just that we still have, especially in the areas of racial, on our staff said it best. She says, we have to continue to celebrate how far we've come. We've come so far. And I realize that as a Black woman, that we have come so far. And the experiences that I get to have are so different than the experiences of my parents or my grandparents. And at the same time, I want to live in the healthy tension of also at the same time realizing we have so far to go. And in order to do that, we got to lean into what's really difficult and push forward, being thankful for how far we've come, but at the same time, being relentlessly determined about how far we still have to go. Living in the healthy tension, leaning into the hard, I really believe will help us get to some meaningful places. So those are three. You got a little energy for one more before I shut up? All right. So I'll try not to talk your ear off too much longer here, but and the last one really is something I learned from being mentored by Coach Wooden, is that, you know, what did Coach Wooden, many of you have heard this quote over and over again. How did Coach Wooden define a perfect day? He defined a perfect day by giving to someone else without any expectation of anything in return. Quite frankly, you all live this in what you do together. But I think that in the day-to-day, it is, for me, this during 2020, it has been so much and so intense and so immense that sometimes I just need to narrow it down and go, okay, am I going to grow in one little area today? And am I going to give to one person today with no expectation of anything in return? And if I just do those two things, then I'm going to determine this to be a great day. And what it's helped me to do is to narrow my focus. You know, body, soul, and mind. I think about, and I've been doing this sort of preaching to myself thing on social media, and a couple of you I think have commented, and I appreciate the encouragement. It's sort of my therapy. Like, you guys are like my diary, and I just sort of tell you what I'm thinking that particular week about leadership and life and whatever else. But I was thinking about just thankfulness, and that we've been telling our players that joy is not a circumstance. Joy comes from within. So even when our circumstances of 2020 are really, really difficult, that we have the choice to choose joy, and we have the choice to be thankful. And when I say thankful, with the emphasis on full, is something doesn't become full unless it is filled. So there's a sort of, it's intended that you have to fill yourself up with gratitude in order to be a thankful person, to be full. And I always think, if I want to be that person who embraces the hard and who gives to others and does those things, I have to discipline myself to fill up so that it's overflowing out of me. I'm not manufacturing it, I'm not being fake about it, that it comes from a really true place from within, and it pours out into the people around me on my good days. And believe me, I have more days where it doesn't work that way than it does. But that is truly the intention of my heart. I want to foster gratitude and really learn, how could I love my neighbor? Okay, we're family here today, right? And I know, Vicki, you know where I live, so you might even know my neighbor. I have this one neighbor who's just really difficult. And so we just, I don't know. It's just hard. We just sort of have clashed a little bit. We've had a little confrontation and whatever else. And I thought, okay, here's where the rubber meets the road, Cori. Are you going to love that neighbor? So he gets really mad at my gardener, the person who he thinks that he puts too much when he's blowing out the gutters in front of the yard, that a little bit goes into his gutter. I was like, oh my goodness gracious. But I had a choice, right? So am I going to be a liver of what I say, or am I just going to be fake and spew out things? And so I'm like psyching myself up. And we started having this thing called driveway theory that Coach Tasha would lead our little workout thing. And so at 8 a.m, and I was like, okay, before he even gets up, I'm going to go out and I have a little blower, and I'm going to, the days that the gardener comes, I'm going to love my neighbor and I'm going to blow off his gutter for him. I'm going to sweep it down. I'm going to blow it off, because the reality is that if I have either unforgiveness or bitterness, is he losing or am I? I am. And so when I learn to love my neighbor anyways, when I choose to give and grow in the way that Coach Wooden taught me and modeled for me over and over again, who wins? I win. It really isn't about my neighbor. It's about my heart. And if I want to survive 2020, I want to fill my heart with things that help me live a perfect day, to give and to grow to others. And I win. When I don't do it, the other person doesn't lose, I lose. Just little simple things like writing a note of encouragement to someone else. Maybe I'm sending a gift card to somebody on my sports staff. Part of growing, to me, I have dyslexia, and so reading is not easy for me. So if I just read 5 pages, I think that's a good day. I grew a little bit today. I've been learning a little bit about iMovie, or if I make one better nutritional choice. Here's where I tend to not apply focus and refocus. So I'm trying to lose some weight, and I'm trying to make good choices. And if I'm a refocus person, if I slip up and I have one cookie, I go up, awareness, let's refocus, let's get back on track, let's make the next right behavioral choice. But what do I really want to do? Oh, screw it. I've already broken the diet. I might as well have 12 DD Reese cookies if I already broke it with one, right? I mean, but honestly, that's what I'm trying to do, is live those things out and just go, if I can make one right nutritional choice that I didn't make yesterday, this one, I grew a little bit. If I could just do one thing that gives to someone else without any expectation of anything in return, I win. I put my head on the pillow that night and I can say, man, Coach Wooden, I hear you. I had a perfect day. I really just tell myself, let's not make this harder than it is. Keep it simple, stupid. I'm talking, of course, to me, not to you in this way. And, I think if we could I think that's what Coach Wooden taught me. I would come to him and I would walk into his den and I would go in and I'd ask him what I thought were these complex questions. And you know what he always did? I mean, almost always, is he just brought it back to a simple principle. There's a simple choice. Are you going to go to neutral here? Do you know what he would always answer a question with a question. It was really annoying, but it was very effective. And he would say, well, do you know, he wouldn't say probably in the language of neutral thinking, but something like, well, do you know what your right next step should be? And usually I did, but he just made it very simple. Do you know? Well, then go do it. Like, what's the problem here? Why are we making what is a simple choice? It may be a difficult one, but it's a simple one. And I think I've found in 2020, there's a lot of complicated things. And the more I can keep it to a simple truth or a simple choice, the more I'm going to be able to live a day where I gave to someone else and I grew just a little bit. It's not the grandiose things we say. It's doing the small, simple things with elite consistency. I'm not going to solve racial injustices in our country, probably in this time frame, right? I mean, there's a lot of convoluted parts of that. I'm not going to have the perfect environment, but I can do the simple right things with elite consistency. I can do that. I can grow into that. I can create those kinds of habits. It's interesting. I'll close with this statement. And so, here we are, we set and reset, put it in neutral, lean into the hard, and try to give and grow. Those have been the 4 things I've had to preach to myself most often and most consistently. Those are the things I've had to pick myself up on and say, you didn't do well that day, but let's try again tomorrow. My question to my players and staff has been very consistent. And this is what I just keep going back to. And I get sort of choked up because I want to do this well for them so badly. But what would it look like to love and lead you well through these times? And I want, at the end of this year, I want to be able to look back and go, I wasn't perfect, but I listened to them. I listened to our staff. I listened to our young women. And I tried to do the simple things with elite consistency that would show them that I wanted to love and lead them well. So, sorry. Are we, any of us, going to get 2020 right? I doubt it. But can we look back in 10 years, 20 years, whatever amount of time and go, man, that year grew my heart in empathy. It enlarged my heart. It expanded my mind. And it made me live a whole lot more perfect days. And I think it can do that. And so that's what I'm trying to live in perfectly myself. And that's what I would hope encourages you on one little small front. So thanks for letting me hang out with you. I'll answer any questions or take anything from your end. So thanks for letting me pour my heart out.
Thank you. You're just terrific. Really wonderful and so inspirational. I started writing things down and I couldn't get them all, but I'll tell you the visualization that I'll walk away with that I will keep is your heart has to be so filled with gratitude that it just keeps overflowing. And so of course joy comes from there. Many other inspirational things, but that's my takeaway.
Thank you,
We've got people who are submitting questions, but I have a couple to get us going. First, near the end there, you talked about your women, young women in your staff. How are they doing? What are their biggest concerns today?
Ooh, that might take a little too long, but they're doing incredibly well. We have a lot of interesting dynamics right now. We have had 2 players that have chosen to opt out this season, and we will walk with them well and try to really support them through these times. And they have some really difficult circumstances that make COVID really scary for them. And so our Kiara Jefferson, I think that it actually came out in the LA Times today, so I'm not telling you anything that's not public, but so Kiara Jefferson and Kayla Owens have decided to sit this year out. So our numbers are a little lower already with that. And then just to make life interesting, this was the year we chose to have 3 internationals. I had probably one of the best recruiting classes I've ever had here at UCLA. And 3 of the top players in the world, 2 from Australia and 1 from Germany, chose to be with us. But the challenging piece is that if you do not have in-person classes, they're not allowed to come. And so our 2 Aussies, now thankfully my German is a dual citizen, so she is here. But our 2 Aussies have not. We are in the process of doing some spirited negotiation with ICE and Homeland Security and trying to get those people to be able to come into the country. So we're literally in process. So right now, today we had 7 players in practice, and the maximum without those Aussies we only have 8. So that's the real challenge this year, is just to sort of train really gradually and really well and safely, but try to keep everybody healthy. So those are the real challenging pieces. And the other part, I think, is just the physical training, and that is challenging. But this has been incredibly hard on these women from a mental health standpoint. So really being intentional about providing resources, counseling, having hard conversations, showing up with them, having healthy dialogue. Those are 2 of the biggest challenges right now, is operating with our numbers and really trying to walk through some really difficult internal things with these young women.
How are they doing with all of the social justice concerns?
Sorry, we have a staff meeting, and so I got the dogs barking. So we're, like we said, we're family. I think that let me get this right here, but I would encourage you to follow us on social media. If you do that, either on On Facebook, it's all UCLA WBB, or on Instagram or on Twitter. And the reason I say that is our young women that in the areas of this social justice issues have developed this group called More Than a Dream. And DREAM is an acronym for diversity, inclusion. Oh man, I'm gonna mess it up. But well, if you go on those sites, they have the mission statement down. They've got the acronym down. What they're trying to do, they're trying to celebrate people. They're trying to synergistically bring people into the fold. They're trying to make a difference in the communities. They all have different areas that they're doing. They've started these really hard conversations called Brew and Table Talk, and they're trying to do those things. But so the way they've handled it has been inspiring. They have wanted to build bridges. They've wanted to do things that really inspire change. They've wanted to enter in and even have really hard conversations with people that disagree, and how do we work through that, and how do we love someone that maybe really disagrees with us, and how do we go about having those conversations. But it's maybe been one of my 27 years of coaching, one of the things that's taught me more and inspired me more is watching them live out from this very difficult space. It's been incredible. Thank you. Diversity, reveal, educate, advocate. Thank you very much for covering for my blank, and motivate. So there you go. So those are the ways in which they're trying to live that out. I'm very, very proud of them.
Oh, they sound terrific. Just wonderful. Yeah.
I wish you could come hang out with them.
Oh, thank you. Good. Okay. Except for COVID-19.
Exactly.
But I sure would like to. You mentioned John Wooden, and I know he's been inspiration for you. Do you use the pyramid of success in your coaching or your life?
My life all the time. In my coaching, yes, as well, but maybe not as, directly. You might not hear that exact language, but if you look at especially the foundation part of the pyramid, and especially when I first got here, we actually blocked it out, the upper levels, and every year we would take the foundational year blocks, and then the next year I would say now they've really just become a part of our cultural language, organic way. We probably don't use the term pyramid of success as much as we do, but it's definitely a part of our culture and framework that we try to live through.
Oh, interesting. So you've talked about the challenges. What are you most excited about for this year and this team? Got to stay positive, right?
Exactly. Well, I think we're just really excited about being together. I think even as women, this has been accentuated, the sense of isolation. We are used to being connected. We are used to having community through sport, and that they've been without that for 6 months. And so just to start to be able to be back together, to have connection, to pursue something together. I'm really excited just to be back in that kind of framework. And, if there's anything a silver lining, we're just so grateful. We're grateful to bounce the ball together. We're grateful to be able to run around. We're grateful to have the great facilities that we're able to train in at UCLA. We're grateful for the incredible UCLA trailblazing work in the area of the medical advisory group that is really, UCLA is in the cutting edge. We've got the best here. And so I'm just so much more aware of how many tools we have at UCLA that many, many don't.
Cori, I want to backtrack to the Australian story. First of all, is Chantel okay?
Yeah, it's only the law that keeps them out of the country only applies to incoming student athletes. So our Canadian, our older ones, if you're a sophomore or above, they're fine. They're fine. It's just the incoming ones.
I thought that across all the sports, there were 23 international athletes that were supposed to come, and UCLA was going to try to have distance in-person classes for them to get around this. That has fallen by the wayside.
Yeah, it was that was the hope, and that was what they were trying for. They were not able to pull that piece together to have an in-person class that's socially distanced, or even a hybrid that was intended to become in person. So that is, if we don't win this sort of, I'm not going to say lawsuit necessarily, but negotiation right now with Homeland Security and with ICE, that we will then hope that we can create one of those for winter quarter. But yeah, UCLA was not able to, for a whole bunch of complicated reasons, able to have that class created.
So another question that's come in through the chat room, how can we support you during this time?
Well, I think you all are just, you're spectacular. I think just, it's hard for me to answer that because COVID, I wish you could just come. Like, I loved it when y'all came to practice one time, and
Oh, we loved it. It was so much fun. Yeah.
And it was just so great to be able to point to your stories and be able to tell them about the example that you're showing. But, you know, honestly, you know, this will be, you know, I think just, I don't know, it's very hard to answer. I'm fumbling, but I think just, I would say tune in to our games, follow us on social media, show interest, show support, comment on our players are really trying to prepare for name, image, and likeness. I know this sounds like but some of our players come from very, very difficult financial situations. And when the law changes for name, image, and likeness, probably next summer, they're going to have a chance to monetize their brand, which could be a tremendous help. And a lot of these things have not advantaged women before. This is something that can really affect women's financial futures. And so if you comment on their pictures and you bring engagement to what they're trying to do in building their brand, that makes a difference for them. So, but I think even more importantly, I think it just tells them we're with you, we see you, we appreciate you. And right now their journey, that goes a long way. So the more that you can enter in with our players and who they're becoming and who they're impacting, we always say in our program that there's only two things that will stay with you for the rest of your life from these 4 years. And it's who you become and who you impact. It's not even banners. It's not rings collect dust. It's who you become and who you impact. That stays with you the rest of your life. So when you see them and who they're becoming and who they're impacting and you affirm that journey, that goes a long way.
That's a great idea, to interact with them. That's so easy for us, isn't it? It should be. Yeah. Okay, so what about your life apart from UCLA and the wonderful team? Are you able to get away and do anything that is a break?
Oh,
How do you do that?
Yeah, you know, I would say it's been difficult, you know, just in terms of how to do that safely and how to, you know, it's been a challenge. I said to a good friend of mine the other day, this feels like my first year of becoming a head coach. You just knew you were going to have to put your head down, and this was not going to be a comfortable year. And I feel like this is sort of one of those years that I think I'm going to have to be really, really, really good about living out what I just preached, taking time every day, exercising, you know, really taking self-care. I don't think it's going to take the form of vacation for a while or getting away that way, but I think I'm going to have really good life habits so that I can sustain the kind of principled, centered life I really want to lead.
Thank you for that. And thanks so much for spending your time sharing those 4 points that I got down. But as I told you, I'm going to walk away with that one visual of my heart overflowing. A really big thank you for setting aside so much time for us from your busy schedule. We're inspired, and I'm glad to have an update on the women's basketball program. I'm going to get on them with Facebook. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. And as you could see from the turnout, we had a whole lot more people come after the business meeting, and there's some comments in the chat room saying to you how much we've enjoyed it all. So a very big thank you to you, and also to the development events team behind the scenes, Melissa Delgadillo and Stella Plato and Lauren Gutierrez, for all their support and assistance. That I'm still trying to learn all this. We have other programs, as all of you know, the work, and we've got more plans for the rest of the calendar year, and we'll keep everyone posted, as you as well, Cori. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much.
And this concludes our day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.